Over 4 million people globally have died because of the COVID-19 virus. Despite efforts to slow the spread, the virus continues to mutate, and the consensus from healthcare professionals is that vaccination is the best option. If you have received your full dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, you are in the global minority of 14.1% of the population, and in Nigeria, a part of less than 1% of the population. While some people are unwilling to be vaccinated, the vast majority of people in developing countries do not have the opportunity to get the vaccine if they want, because it is a scarce resource. Pharmaceutical companies in the European Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States have led vaccine manufacturing. However, they are not currently producing at the scale required to meet the need globally. In the interest of making the vaccines available to every person, calls have been made for pharmaceutical companies to not enforce their proprietary rights in their vaccines.
We think it's important to talk about this and give you some legal background so that you could better understand the intellectual property issues in this conversation.
Yes, as you know, intellectual property is that area that deals with the creation of the human intellect. And this would cover things like trademarks, patents, designs, artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth. And all of these things used in the fight against COVID, the ventilators, the vaccines, the medications, protective gear, and so on and so forth, are all products of intellectual property. These are things that, a lot of money and time and effort have gone into R&D, to be able to come up with these things. And so the companies and manufacturers of this product deserve some incentive for their innovation. They deserve some reward, for it. But on the other hand, we have a pandemic in our hands, and a lot of people are in need of this products of intellectual property. That is the vaccines, the protective gear, the medications, ventilators, and so on and so forth. The question therefore then is, how do you balance, the need to incentivize the manufacturers and reward their innovation against the needs of those who are in need of these vaccines and all of that? Because that's where patents, the rights you get from patents and trade secrets and all of that come into play. I want to talk about patents and trade secrets and what they are.
Sure. So patents and trade secrets are the forms of intellectual property that apply to vaccines.
Yeah.
So a patent is a monopoly, an exclusive right given by the government to an inventor in exchange for their disclosure of that invention.
Yeah.
So if you invent a vaccine or a medicine and you're able to put in writing how you created it, when you file this with the government, in exchange for that, you'll be given a monopoly of about 20 years.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you don't want to disclose your invention to the government for a patent, you could keep it a secret, right? So where you keep your invention a secret, nobody else will be able to create it apart from you. But if anybody does figure out how to make it, then you wouldn't be able to stop them from doing it. But once you filed your patent, in exchange for that disclosure that you've made, the government guarantees your right for you to be the only person to manufacture, sell, import, do anything commercial with that patent. So this means that if you file a patent in the COVID vaccine and somebody else figures out how to create your vaccine, if they do that without your permission, you could sue them for patent infringement.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to know that in the COVID vaccine, for instance, you may have several patents and trade secrets involved because vaccines are really complicated products.
An example would be the vaccine manufacturer Moderna that has at least 7 patents for its mRNA technology, for the COVID-19 vaccine. So the thing is, these exclusive rights that is granted by your patent, for a patent is granted for disclosure, right? Whereas in the case of trade secrets, you're protected because you do not disclose.
Yes.
But based on the exclusive rights, a lot of people are now not able to, manufacture these patents, even though we have a humanitarian, crisis on our hands at this point. So there have been a lot of calls from various quarters for, the suspension of intellectual property rights for this period to be able to manufacture these vaccines in large quantities to meet the demand at present.
So I'm sure you've read about the TRIPS Waiver, where led by countries like India and South Africa, who are calling for a suspension of or a waiver of intellectual property rights as relates to the COVID-19 vaccine and COVID, everything that's relevant to fighting the COVID pandemic. Yes. So in essence, what they're asking for is this. The TRIPS agreement, that's the agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property, is an agreement between all the member states of the WTO. And in this agreement, they've agreed to uphold a minimum standard of intellectual property protection in their different jurisdictions, which includes patents and copyright, trade secrets. So what the countries in support of the waiver are asking for is that, as far as COVID is concerned, for a period of 3 years minimum, IP rights should be suspended as relates to COVID-19 or inventions that could be useful to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. And there have been different reactions from this. The US has said they are in support of it, but on the other hand, the EU is against it. Countries like Brazil, Japan, and Australia are also against the TRIPS waiver. And I mean, Nigeria is yet to disclose its position. We're still consulting internally. So what do you think about the waiver?
I mean, I think it's a noble idea. You know, everyone knows what we're facing globally. It's not a problem that's, you know, restricted to just one country, you know, or one jurisdiction or the other. It's a noble idea, but beyond it being a noble idea, you know, having a waiver of the TRIPS and all that, the fact still remains that it's something that we still need to look into as to implementation. Okay, so countries like Canada, Bangladesh, India, and so on, you know, have the capability to produce these vaccines and all that. But the issue is whether they're able to get the necessary licenses from the patent holders to be able to produce these vaccines, and that's a major issue. And then even where this, you know, these licenses are obtained, the scale, you know, it's another question, another concern, because this is something that is needed worldwide at the same time. So are they able to meet up with the demand? You know, because everyone recognizes the fact that we need these vaccines, and it seems to be the best way to check the spread of the virus, you know, at the moment. Beyond that is that some countries do not even have the capacity or the capability to do so. So even if the vaccines are available for everyone to produce, there's a suspension of IP rights and all of that. There are so many countries that may still not be able to produce these vaccines. And then finally, we have issues of regulation, depending on the country, and laws and legislation. So for Nigeria, unless the TRIPS is domesticated into our laws, you know, or codified, would be unable to, you know, observe the waiver, exactly. So it's not, for me, it's not so much whether it's a good idea or whether it's about implementation and whether it's doable in the first place.
Like how practical
is it in the first place?
Yes. So there are other options that we could consider in the meantime. One is compulsory licensing. So we know that under Nigerian patent law, for instance, it is possible to compulsory license a patent that has been filed at the registered with the Patents and Designs Registry. So what this entails is that where a patent has been filed in a particular country, the government can authorize a third party to use that patent to produce the products, and the government would then determine what compensation it would pay to the manufacturer. This would be helpful in places where a patent has actually been filed, because if a patent has not been filed, you cannot compulsorily license it. On the other hand, we could look at voluntary licensing and technology transfer, which is what the WHO is trying to do in South Africa with the support of France. So they recently announced a hub where vaccine makers or people with vaccine technology would supply the know-how and teach it to South African pharmaceutical companies that have the capacity to produce these products. So when they do that, they would be able to teach them, because as we've said, if you have the vaccine, the patents, it doesn't mean that you know how to implement it and actually like produce that product. So they would bring them together to transfer that knowledge, and the WHO is going to facilitate by helping them get the licenses that they need from Moderna or whoever it is that they need to get the vaccine from. And then finally, another option is just scaling up production. So we know that, for instance, Moderna is in the US, and I think Pfizer is in Germany. I think, or Pfizer is in Europe, right? So if they could expand to other places and expand production so that we could scale. So Moderna recently announced that they were going to set up a plant in Canada. So this is good news because they just get to go there and use their technology and their know-how, which would hopefully result in more vaccines in that region and for the world in general.
Yeah. So it's interesting times, I believe there are more conversations that are ongoing or discussions in this regard. And I think in November, there's going to be another meeting of the WTO to discuss the TRIPS waiver. And we look forward to seeing how this is going to pan out.
Yeah.